Wow, it is like we learn nothing from what Jesus even told the Pharisees back in the day, telling them to stop repeating their prayers, because that is exactly what the Rosary was made for, and that's exactly what people are doing today.
Now, Daniel doesn't explicitly cite any biblical support for his claim here, but I suspect that he's got in mind Matthew chapter 6, verse 7, in which Jesus says not to heap up empty phrases, or in the King James Version, not to use vain repetitions. But Jesus is clearly not saying that we're not allowed to use form prayers. The Psalms are form prayers. And he's not saying that we're not allowed to pray the same prayer repeatedly. After all, in the very next breath, he gives us a form prayer. He gives us the Our Father. And we know that even as far back as the first century, Christians were in the habit of praying this prayer 3 times a day. Jesus himself in the Garden of Gethsemane prays the same prayer 3 times in a row. As Matthew 26 tells us, Jesus went away and prayed for the 3rd time, saying the same words. St. Paul likewise describes going to God with the same prayer request repeatedly. So what does Jesus actually prohibit in Matthew chapter 6? Well, the Greek word there refers to someone stammering or rambling or a mindless sort of repetition. In other words, when you're praying, don't just do it mindlessly. And Catholics agree. As Pope St. John Paul II explained, the recitation of the Rosary calls for a quiet rhythm and a lingering pace, helping the individual to meditate on the mysteries of the Lord's life as seen through the eyes of Mary. In contrast, if we're just mindlessly saying the words, that kind of mechanical repetition of formulas is the very thing that Jesus warns against. But this is true of any prayer, even the prayer that Jesus himself gives us in Matthew 6. So repetitive prayer and form prayer are good and perfectly biblical, but only if done in a way that is contemplative and not just mindlessly mechanical.